everyone, welcome back to another IELTS listening skills lesson. Last lesson we looked at understanding accents. This lesson we're going to be looking at recognizing, whoops, I got distracted there. But hey, that's what we're going to be looking at this lesson, and that's recognizing distractors. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So what exactly are distractors in the IELTS listening exam? In the audio, a speaker might give some wrong information, then correct themselves and give the right information. The wrong information before the correct one is called the distractor. It's really easy to get distracted by the information you hear the first time, thinking that it's the correct answer, and many IELTS candidates get caught here. This section of the IELTS sets out to show which candidates can listen effectively and which can't. One of the ways of doing so is to set traps, like distractors. Especially since you have 30 minutes and 40 questions to answer in that time, you wouldn't want to lose crucial marks because you didn't listen properly. Now let's look at the different types of distractors that can or will appear in the IELTS listening exam. First of all, words that have already been mentioned. For example, you're completing a multiple choice question. You would be looking at an answer option and the person in the audio would mention the answer you were looking at. You might think that that's the answer, but just because it's mentioned doesn't mean it's right. For example, if speaker 1 says something like, okay, so you have 3 options for freight. Speaker 2, could you please explain that to me? Speaker 1 again says, so, sure, you can elect to have your goods sent by a plane, which is the quickest and safest, but also the most expensive. Or you can choose to have them sent by train, which is safe and less expensive. And finally, you can send your things by truck, which is less safe but much cheaper. And then speaker 2 says, yes, sending by truck can take far too long. I'm in a bit of a rush, so I'll go for the fastest option, please. Now, the question could be something like, what is the type of delivery chosen? And you have the options plane, train, and truck. So here the speaker says, sending by truck can take far too long. So this is the right answer? Well, no. Because then he says, I'll go with the fastest option. And the fastest option is plane. So here we have an example of an answer option that is mentioned but is incorrect. This is a really common way to lose a mark. Next is the use of synonyms. Let's look at what synonyms mean first. Synonyms are words or phrases that mean exactly or nearly the same as another word or phrase in the same language. For example, shut is a synonym of close. Let's look at how this works by listening to an example.
Where do you live, Linda?
Unit 15, 35 Maximilian Way.
That's in Whitfield, right? I have a cousin who lives in that area.
Yes, Whitfield.
And the postcode is 7755.
Not quite. You've got it round the wrong way. It's 5577.
Okay, so instead of saying 7755, the man says 7755. Of course they mean the same thing, but this way the examiner can test whether you understand the content while adding another layer of distraction to your test. Distractor type 3, negatives. Usually a negative is where you negate something or say that isn't usually using the word not. In the IELTS listening, this style of distractor is used often, where you'll be tempted to choose an answer because the word is said, but there could be a hidden not somewhere. Let's look at an example.
We provide all the meals, so we need to know if you have any dietary restrictions.
I don't think so. What do you mean?
I mean, if there's any food you can't eat. Some people have food allergies or are vegetarian or have to avoid dairy products, things like that.
Oh, I see. Well, yes, I'm a vegetarian. I never eat meat.
The next distractor, corrections. What happens here is that the wrong answer is given first, followed by the right answer. This means you can't predict the order in which the answer and the distractor would come. Here, the examiner is testing whether you understand the content and context rather than writing down the first answer you hear. So for example, in the audio, you may hear a conversation between a customer and a booking officer where the customer wants to book a hotel room. So the customer says something like, I want to book a room in your hotel. And then speaker 2, which is the booking officer, would say, okay, you'll need to complete some paperwork. When will you be arriving? And then the customer says 20th of January. Oh, so sorry, that's my leaving date. I'll be reaching out on the 17th. So please set it up on that date. And the final distractor we're going to look at is similar sounding words. With similar sounding words in the IELTS listening, it's easy to get it wrong because you may have misheard the word because the correct word sounds very similar to an incorrect word. For example, in the audio, if you hear someone say, "I'll be traveling to Austria next week," did you hear Austria or Australia? This is one of the many examples of this type of distractor. Whew, now that we know all about distractors, let's look at a few tips on how to tackle and avoid them during your listening exam. First of all, my favorite piece of advice, practice, practice, practice. You will be able to get the gist of how distractors appear and make sure to check your answers so that you can see if you're on the right track. You'll also need to pay close attention while you're listening. It's easy to get distracted during the exam. Remember, you will not be able to pause, rewind, or hear the audio again, so make sure you are attentive and alert. Also, make sure you don't jump into or make hasty conclusions. It's important to carefully listen before jumping into conclusions, because sometimes the information given in one sentence can be twisted and mean something else. It's critical to listen to all the facts before drawing any conclusions. Again, remember, it's not always the case that the very first answer is right. Listen to the following information carefully. The next one is a good tip. Listen out for words like sorry or no. This will give you a clue to the right answer which is coming up. Also, keep an ear out for numbers and names. The major distractors take place where there are numbers and/or names involved, such as phone numbers, house numbers, zip codes, name of a street, price of some items, flight numbers, distances between two places, or even the name of a person. All right, before we sign off, let's do a quick recap. This lesson, we looked at what distractors are, the types of distractors and how to spot them during your listening exam, and some tips on how to tackle and avoid them. Be sure to join me for the next lesson. See you then.